y'all, howdy. Welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandy Broadwell, and today we're going to talk about r/fantasy bingo. This is the Reddit bingo challenge that goes out for fantasy sci-fi readers every year, and the challenge runs from April 1st through March 31st. So the challenge just ended, and I successfully completed my entire bingo card, which I am super excited about. This is my second or third year of completing the bingo challenge. I did cheat just a little bit, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So I thought today I would just run through all 25 books that I read to complete r/fantasy bingo this year and what I thought of the selections so that you can get some good book recommendations from this video. So first up, the square in the bottom left corner is called Recycle a Bingo Square. So the challenge there is to just pick any bingo square from any of the previous r/fantasy bingo challenges and swap in a square that you want to use. So for that one, I chose a prompt from the 2018 r/fantasy bingo, and the challenge was a space opera where the protagonist is not in the military or a pirate. So that's what I chose for that square, and without further ado, let's talk about the prompts. Up at the top, we have Knights and Paladins. For this one, I read The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. This is a story about a legendary lady knight who is this outsized historical figure that kind of defined the trajectory of this country. And a historian that is obsessed with her and has spent his whole life studying her centuries later ends up traveling back in time to her timeline and is tasked by the government to ensure that she follows out the task that she's supposed to so that history plays out the way it has in the past. And it ends up being kind of a time loop situation. When he meets Una Everlasting in real life, she's nothing like what he expected, but he ends up falling in love with the woman that she is, and then ultimately feels really conflicted about leading her on these tasks that will ultimately lead to her untimely demise. I absolutely loved this book. It was beautifully written. I gave it 5 stars. It definitely pulled at my heartstrings, and I would recommend this very highly. Then the next prompt was Hidden Gem, and for this one, you were supposed to pick a book that has less than 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. This was the one that I cheated on just a little bit because it wasn't supposed to be a book that was published in 2025 because potentially new release books haven't had time to find their readers. But as of today, Memory of the Ogiesi by Moses Oze-Utomi is the only book that I read last year that has less than 1,000 ratings besides the self-published book that I'm going to talk about when we get to that square. So I technically read a hidden gem, but not quite to the parameters that Reddit Bingo wanted me to. Memory of the Ogiesi is the third and final book in the Forever Desert trilogy of novellas, and honestly, I was not super impressed. I think I liked the first book in this series the most, and the other two I thought were just okay. They do have a really cool atmosphere. The setting is really interesting. It feels a bit like you're reading mythology. So if those vibes sound good, you might like it, but it's very hopeless feeling, very sort of grimdark in the end, which just wasn't what I wanted. Then I had to read a book published in the 80s, and for that one I read Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This is a sci-fi classic. It was published in 1989. I have the second book on my upcoming TBR. I'm very excited to continue. But this book is about a pilgrimage. This group of like 7 people are chosen by the Church of the Shrike to go to the Time Tombs at their prophesized opening. The Time Tombs are this strange place on the planet of Hyperion where time moves backwards. And they know that the Time Tombs will eventually open. They are guarded by this alien entity called the Shrike, which basically murders everyone who comes close to it. And these people who are chosen to go on this pilgrimage don't understand why they were chosen. They are not members of the Church of the Shrike, but they go on this quest because they all have mysterious backgrounds and secrets about themselves that they end up sharing over the course of their journey to get to the Time Tombs. And all of their stories were just utterly fascinating. It was such a wild ride. It was almost like a series of short stories because each of their stories were so different. I absolutely loved it. I have a hard time describing this book, but it absolutely blew my mind. Highly recommend. The next square was high fashion, and for that one I chose the Rook and Rose trilogy. The very first book in that is The Mask of Mirrors. I read the entire trilogy over the course of this r/fantasy bingo challenge, and it is one of my new favorite series of all time. The author is M.A. Carrick. This is a Venetian setting, high fantasy world with a lot of really good court intrigue, political intrigue, maneuverings of the underbelly of society. There's a masked vigilante. There is so much cool stuff that goes on in this world. There's like old gods rising up and tarot-based magic system of the indigenous people as they're trying to rise up against the ruling class who are not native to their land. It's so freaking rad, and the characters are absolutely ones that you want to root for and care about, and they're all so complicated and real, and they have such great found family by the end. I ate this series up. I love it so much. The last square on the top row is Down with the System, and for that one I read The Will of the Many by James Islington. The Will of the Many is definitely a Down with the System book. It is about a young man named Viz who is orphaned very young because the evil empire, basically known as the hierarchy, murders his family because they are royals of a small kingdom, and the hierarchy is taking over his kingdom. He escapes. They don't know that he's still alive, but he is raised in an orphanage basically from that point forward and just tries to hide his identity. He ends up getting found by a senator of the hierarchy who wants to adopt a son in order to send them to this magical academy that is run by the religious sect of the government. And the senator thinks that the school is hiding some sort of conspiracy against the other branches of government. And so he wants his son to infiltrate this school and tell him what's really going on there. The senator does not realize Viz's true identity, and so he's balancing that against this opportunity. And at the same time, he is recruited by the rebellion who is fighting against the hierarchy and has to put on multiple faces. No one that's trying to use him really understands what his motivations are, and it just turns into a super fascinating story. I love the kind of military academy-ness of it all. The school year builds up to a sort of deadly competition, very much Hunger Games or Red Rising-esque, so it's a ton of fun. Second row, the first square was Impossible Places, and for that one I read The Book That Held Her Heart by Mark Lawrence. This is the third and final book in the Library trilogy, which is about an infinite library, obviously an impossible place. I liked this series, but unfortunately for me, the very first book in the series was the best. I really loved the first book. I thought the setup of it was very cool. And the second and third book I thought were just okay. So it was a bit of a letdown, but I still really love Mark Lawrence's world building, his writing, all of the thought that goes into the different factions that are at play, kind of the mystery hidden in the series is very, very cool. I just didn't feel the emotional impact that I wanted, that I felt like was set up in the first book. So for me, a little bit disappointing, but I still had a good time. The next square is A Book in Parts. There were tons of options, of course, that have like part 1, part 2, part 3. I chose Shroud by Adrian Tchaikovsky because I just absolutely love this book and wanted it to be somewhere on this list. Shroud has one of the coolest alien environments, alien species, alien planets, the very foreignness of it all. It is about a resource extraction crew that ends up crash landing on this inhospitable planet and discovering life. But the life is absolutely alien in every way from what we know of as life. And I just thought Adrian Tchaikovsky's incredible mind pulling that off was just, it was definitely a one-of-a-kind reading experience, and it's creepy and cool, and I just absolutely loved it. For the square Gods and Pantheons, I read God Killer by Hannah Connor. This one, I liked the first book, but I only got about 10% of the way into the second book, and then I was just like, meh, I'm not feeling it. so I put it down. Which is unfortunate because I did have a good time with the first book. But the first book is about a woman who, her family is killed by a god, and she spends her whole life then hunting down and killing gods. The plot is more complicated than that, but I mean, that's the premise. So if that sounds good to you, it sounded good to me, that's why I picked it up. The next square was last in a series, and I did finish the Empire of the Wolf trilogy, which ended with The Trials of Empire by Richard Swan. I loved this series. This is very dark fantasy. It has necromancy and the like afterlife setting that they travel into by the third book is just utterly gripping. This series is super gritty and the characters are very compelling. I highly, highly recommend picking up Empire of the Wolf if you haven't gotten to it yet. The final square on the second row was book club or read-along book, which is again to do with the Reddit fantasy page, any book that they've read for their book club or read-alongs over the years. And so for that one, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a horror classic about a haunted house in the 1950s and a group of paranormal experts that go to the house to try and study it and the strange paranormal activities that happen while they're in the house. I really liked this book in the first half, and then in the second half, I felt like our narrator kind of unravels her sanity, goes off the rails a little bit, and that was definitely the point of the book, but I liked that character so much at the beginning. It was hard to tell where the line was as she was unraveling, and by the end of it, I just felt a little bit confused and less engaged in the story than from what I started out as. I definitely understand why this is a classic. It is very compelling. It is super creepy in some parts. Yeah, some of the scenes still definitely stick with me, and I think this is very deserved to be on the Haunted House Classics list. First on the third row is a book that involved parents as the protagonist. And so for that one, I read The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip Fracassi. This is a newer sci-fi book about a husband and wife team that invent time travel, but they work for basically a giant evil corporation that after they have invented the time travel, the company tries to take it away from them and give it to a different team. And it's about what happens to them as they get entangled and break their own rules of time travel. They have a daughter, and it's about also their parental dynamics and what happens with their daughter as the timeline gets messed up. It's very compelling. It's very cool. If you're looking for a fun sci-fi thriller, I highly recommend this one. Next up is reading a book in an epistolary format. And epistolary format, I believe, just means like letters. I maybe stretch the definition of this one by choosing a book that is more like mixed media. But for this one, I chose World War Z by Max Brooks. World War Z is, I believe it's called, An Oral History of the Zombie Apocalypse. And it was very fascinating. It rotates through many, many, many different perspectives, all being interviewed about 10 years after the end of the zombie war, and interviews like government officials and families and military and business owners and like all sorts of people from all spectrums, from all different parts of the world, and how the outbreak happened in their areas and how they survived it or didn't. It's a really, really well thought out story, and it is super fascinating. There's nothing really to sink your teeth into in terms of like a definite character arcs or anything, because you're with each character for so little time. One of my biggest complaints about this book was the lack of female perspectives, and most of the time when there was a female perspective, it was like very much from the perspective of like a mom, whereas like all the cool government officials and like soldiers and everyone that was like kind of important to the story were all male characters. So I liked it for what it was. I would recommend it if you are into zombie stories because it was a really unique one, and it's absolutely nothing like the movie. The next square was published in 2025. I read lots of new releases over this past year, so I could have chosen a lot of different ones for that. But one of my favorite new releases last year that wasn't included on any of the other squares was The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is a really fun fantasy kind of mystery competition story where there are all these different houses They're based on animals, and so there's like the raven house and the bear house and the ox house and the monkey house. And each of the people in these houses kind of are stereotypically a certain personality type. And every 20 years, they compete amongst the houses to see who will be the next emperor. And right at the beginning of this competition that's supposed to take place, the Raven candidate is murdered. And so our main character becomes the new Raven candidate, but she's also investigating who killed the previous one. And it's very twisty and fun, and the competition that they go through is very well done. There's some really obvious like duh moments that the character doesn't see as she's trying to solve the mystery. Like, to me as the reader, it was like obvious who committed the crime, but I guess our main character is a little bit too dumb, even though she's portrayed as being very smart. So it has some flaws, but it was just such a fun read. I really flew through it, and I would very much recommend it. The next book was Read from an Author of Color. I read multiple books that I could have chosen for this square, but one of my favorites that I read last year was Catabasis by R.F. Kuang. I love R.F. Kuang so much. I have loved all of her books, and unpopular opinion, I really loved Catabasis. I actually would rank it higher than Babel, which I know is a very unpopular opinion in terms of her backlist books. But Catabasis is a dark academia story about two different students who end up going to hell to try and save their advisor so that they can finish their like dissertations. And it goes through like the 7 layers of hell. It's sort of based on like Dante's Inferno and the misadventures that they get up to. The main characters are very unlikable, but I really loved kind of the academia-ness of it all and the kind of the reveals that happen and the more we learn about the characters along the way. So it was a big win for me. The last one on the third row was a small press or self-published. And I chose to read the winner of the self-published fantasy blog-off from the previous year, which was By Blood, by Salt by J.L. Odom. This book definitely deserved to have been a contest winner. It was very, very well written. Really felt like a much deeper world that we were just scratching the surface of. It's kind of a deserty, sort of Middle Eastern inspired fantasy with lots of competing cultures and religions, and it's very military based. I thought all of it was very, very well done. I didn't feel super connected to any of the characters, which is really my only complaint about it, but I am interested in picking up the second book to see where it goes. First on the fourth row is reading a biopunk. I'm still not entirely sure I understand what biopunk is, but I did read the Monk and Robot duology by Becky Chambers this year, and I think this has to qualify. It's about robots that decided to step away from humanity and they disappear into the woods for centuries. No one has seen or heard from them in that amount of time, and it's about a tea monk who stumbles across a robot that is coming back to reconnect with humanity and find out what it is that humans want. The monk is also on a self-discovery journey to figure out what it is they want out of their own life, and it's a very cozy sci-fi about these two and their journeys of self-discovery, basically, as the monk brings the robot back into human society and reintroduces it as a kind of ambassador for its people. The next square was Elves and Dwarves, which is just reading a book with a traditional fantasy race. And for that one, I chose The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. The Devils is a very kind of silly grimdark about a priest in the Catholic Church back in the medieval times, and his congregation that he is given is full of like elves and vampires and werewolves, and it's about their kind of journey as they try to carry out a task that the Pope has given them, and the Pope is like a 6-year-old child. So it has Joe Abercrombie's kind of signature, very dark humor. It has a lot of really epic battle scenes. I had a good time with it. I'm looking forward to the next one. Okay, the next square is an LGBTQIA protagonist. I had multiple books I could have chosen for this square as well, but one of my favorites that I read was the Locked Tomb series, which starts with Gideon the Ninth. Gideon was actually my least favorite book of the 3 that are published so far. Harrow the Ninth was my favorite, but I also really really loved Nona the Ninth. I think I gave Gideon probably a 4-star and gave Harrow and Nona both 5 stars, or maybe 5 and 4.5. Really, really awesome series. A little bit confusing to try and figure out what's going on, but it is about this super future society where there are these various houses that are competing to become the next lictor, which is like a necromancer that works for the god emperor. So Harrow is a necromancer and Gideon is her swordswoman who is tasked to protect her. The first book is about them as they go to this competition to try and fight the other houses to see who will become the next lictor. And by the second book, the plot is so vastly different and bigger. It really becomes this super epic sci-fi by book 2, and whereas the first book is kind of like a gothic murder mystery story. The series, I think, has a little bit of everything, and definitely, while maybe not mass appeal, has definitely, I think, found its audience. And that is me. I am the audience. The next square was 5 short stories, and for this one I read a short story collection anthology called We Will Rise Again. I ended up DNFing this, but I definitely read well over 5 of the short stories before I DNF'd it, so I'm still counting it. This was a mixture of both sci-fi short stories and like nonfiction essays, and I actually had a much better time with the nonfiction essays than I did with the short stories. None of them I found very compelling or interesting. Some of the concepts were interesting, but not the implementation for me. But I really liked the idea behind this anthology. It was supposed to be sci-fi and, again, essays about the idea of resistance and rebellion and hope within sci-fi stories. My favorite part of this that I actually read was an essay by Ursula Vernon, which is the real name of the author T. Kingfisher, and she writes about gardening as resistance, and I just really liked that one. The last one on the 4th row is Stranger in a Strange Land, and for that one I read A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. That is the first book in the Teixcatlan duology, and I loved both of these books. So good. The Teixcatlan duology follows this woman who is an ambassador basically to the evil empire. She represents her colony, which is on a space station, and they are riding a delicate balance of being an ally of the empire while trying not to get absorbed by it. And as our main character is given her ambassadorship, it is because the previous ambassador ended up suddenly dead. And so as she is going into this new place where she is an absolute fish out of water, she's also trying to figure out if the previous ambassador died of natural causes or was murdered, and if so, why, and trying to figure out all of the political machinations and everything that is going on as she gets to the empire's capital. On top of that, her people have a super advanced technology that they are trying to keep secret from the empire. And the empire itself is not this huge monolith that she expected it to be. There's actually an uprising that begins shortly after she takes her post. And then by the end of book 1, there's like an alien invasion also happening that gets thrown into the mix. It is so wild. It is so fun. It is so freaking cool. I highly recommend this for anyone looking for a great politically heavy space opera. Then for my Choose a Square, which I chose as the space opera without a military or pirate protagonist, I read The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez. This is a story about a young boy with a magical ability that is highly desired, and about a space captain that finds him and raises him, as well as a sort of immortal CEO who is the one who hired the captain to raise the boy. So there's many different POVs throughout the story. It spans a great deal of time and deals with like the time jumping of long distance space travel. There's found family, but there's also so much tragedy and betrayal, and it is absolutely gut-wrenching. Highly recommend this book. It is one of the most beautiful space operas that I have ever read. Camera angle might be a little different because I had to switch out some battery stuff, but we're very close to the end. The second on the last row is a cozy fantasy or sci-fi, and for this one I read Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. This is the technically sequel to Legends and Lattes, but it follows a character from the prequel to Legends and Lattes. And so the main character in this one is the Raccoon character that owned a bookshop in Bookshops in Bone Dust. And the premise is that this character is moving to the city where Viv the orc lives in order to be close to their friend, and they're setting up a bookshop next to the coffee shop that Viv owns. However, that premise is destroyed within like the first 10%. As soon as the bookshop is set up, the character decides that this isn't what they want to do with their life after all, and what were they thinking, and they get drunk and run away in the middle of the night without telling any of their friends where they went or what they're doing. And I just absolutely hated that. Even though the adventures that they went on, the rest of the story were interesting, I just couldn't forgive the main character for basically betraying their friends and making them think they might have been dead. They abandoned their dog and all of their responsibilities and just left everyone that they care about in a heartsick lurch of a situation. So I did not have a good time with this one, unfortunately. The third to last is a generic title. And for this one, they gave a list of words that appear commonly in fantasy stories. And I chose for this one, How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Wexler. I believe dark was the word that fit the category. So How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying is a very silly kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of story about a woman that is stuck in a time loop where she wakes up in a fantasy world. She doesn't know how she got there. And as soon as she wakes up, there's a wizard waiting there for her who tells her, "You're the chosen one and you have to save us from the Dark Lord." And she's lived through this life now like thousands of times, and every single time the Dark Lord wins and she gets killed. And when she gets killed, she reboots or respawns in the same place and the wizard is there and it starts all over again. And so after many, many lifetimes of living and failing at this task, she finally decides, you know what, screw it. This time I'm gonna be the Dark Lord. And that is where the story kicks off. It's very fun, it's very silly, it's very raunchy. If you really like Deadpool and Dungeon Crawler Carl, then I think you would like this story. The second to last prompt was not a book. And so this was encouraging people to try fantasy and sci-fi and other mediums. I, of course, am a huge fantasy sci-fi nerd in many mediums, but my favorite thing that I think I watched this past year was actually K-pop Demon Hunters. Maybe this is not a surprise. I love animated media, and K-pop Demon Hunters has won like every award that exists there. It's like the most streamed movie that Netflix has ever produced by a long shot. It won like an Emmy and a Golden Globe and an Oscar, and like literally every award that is available to media, K-pop Demon Hunters has won. And I think it's really obvious if you watch it why that is the case. It is so fun. The songs are so catchy. It really took me by surprise. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, but it is a banger of a film. So if you haven't watched K-pop Demon Hunters yet, you're missing out. It's a good time. And finally, the very last prompt was pirates. And for this one, I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. Tress was one of the first like Kickstarter projects that Brandon did a few years ago. And it was a delightful read. I really liked that this story was told from the perspective of Hoid, who is a recurring character throughout many of the Cosmere books. And I just really liked his fun, like silly kind of narration style. Brandon Sanderson has said that his inspiration for this book was The Princess Bride. And so I think that comes through really, really well with Hoid's style of narration. And Tress is a young girl who is in love, and her love gets basically taken away and captured by an evil sorceress. And after Tress realizes that no one else is going to save her true love, she sets out to rescue him for herself. And she gets captured by pirates, ends up becoming a part of the pirate crew. It's a very fun story. The ocean itself that they sail on is made of spores instead of water, and there's a whole spore-based magic system that I thought was very unique. Definitely hit the highlights of Brandon's world building and magic system. His imagination in that realm is definitely unparalleled. So, that's it. Those are the 25 stories that I consumed for Reddit Fantasy Bingo 2025. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought of them, especially if your opinion was different than mine, Or if you also participated in our /fantasy bingo 2025, let me know what your favorite book was that you read for the challenge and which prompt it fulfilled. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for hanging out and tuning in for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.